Rain lashed against the windows, a steady, rhythmic drumming. The sound was almost hypnotic, a constant reminder of the storm's fury outside. Each drop seemed to echo the turmoil within my own mind, a cacophony of thoughts and emotions that refused to be silenced. Inside, the old house was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, almost tangible, pressing down on you. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The dim light cast long shadows, making the empty rooms feel even more desolate. I sat alone, a fire crackling in the hearth, casting flickering shadows. The warmth of the flames was a stark contrast to the cold, damp air that seeped in through the old walls. The firelight danced, creating a mesmerizing display that held my gaze, offering a brief respite from the storm outside. The only sounds were the rain and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Each tick seemed to stretch time, elongating the moments of solitude. The rain, relentless and unyielding, provided a constant backdrop, a reminder of the world outside this cocoon of quiet. It was a night for quiet reflection, the kind of night where memories surface unbidden and thoughts turn inward. I found myself lost in reverie, contemplating the paths I had taken, the choices made, and the roads not traveled. The solitude was both a comfort and a challenge, forcing me to confront my innermost thoughts. A gust of wind rattled the windows. The sudden noise jolted me from my thoughts, a reminder of the storm's growing intensity. The wind howled, a mournful sound that seemed to echo the loneliness of the night. I shivered, pulling a blanket tighter around myself. The warmth was a small comfort against the chill that seemed to permeate everything. The blanket, a familiar and comforting presence, was a barrier against the cold and the unease that had begun to creep in. The storm was picking up. The rain fell harder, the wind blew stronger, and the house creaked and groaned in response. It felt as though the very walls were straining against the onslaught, trying to hold firm against the tempest outside. I glanced at the clock. Almost midnight. Time for bed. The lateness of the hour added to the sense of isolation, the feeling that I was the only person awake in the world. The hands of the clock moved inexorably forward, marking the passage of time with a relentless precision. I rose, stretched, and prepared for sleep. The routine was familiar, a series of actions performed almost without thought. Yet tonight, each movement felt deliberate, as if I was trying to ward off the unease that had settled over me. But something felt off, a prickle of unease at the back of my neck. It was a sensation I couldn't quite shake, a feeling that something was not right. The hairs on my arms stood on end, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. I paused at the bedroom door, listening. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the distant sounds of the storm. I strained to hear anything out of the ordinary, but there was nothing. Just the steady beat of the rain and the occasional creak of the old house. The house was silent, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was an irrational fear, I told myself, a product of the storm and the solitude. But the feeling persisted, a nagging sense of unease that refused to be dismissed. Dismissing it as nerves, I stepped into the room, leaving the door slightly ajar for the warmth from the fireplace to reach me. The firelight cast a comforting glow, a beacon of warmth in the darkness. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing thoughts in my mind. The shadows from the fire danced on the wall, creating eerie shapes that seemed to writhe and twist. They moved with a life of their own, a silent ballet of light and dark. I watched them for a moment, mesmerized by their fluid movements, before finally turning away and climbing into bed, hoping for a peaceful night's sleep despite the storm raging outside. Sleep didn't come easily. The wind howled outside, and the old house creaked and groaned around me. Each gust of wind seemed to whisper my name. Then, I noticed it. The bedroom door, which I had left slightly open, was now ajar, open wider than before. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Had I left it that way? I couldn't be sure. The fire had died down, and the room was cast in deep shadows. I strained my ears, listening for any sound. Silence. A floorboard creaked softly outside the room. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was out there. I was certain of it. Foolishly, I called out, "Hello! Is anyone there?" My voice echoed in the silence, unanswered. I threw back the covers, the fabric rustling loudly in the otherwise silent room. The darkness seemed to press in on me from all sides, making the simple act of getting out of bed feel like a monumental task, and climbed out of bed, my bare feet sinking into the cold wooden floor. The chill shot up through my legs, a stark contrast to the warmth of the bed I had just left behind. Each step felt like a journey into the unknown, the floorboards creaking softly under my weight. Adrenaline coursed through me, overriding my fear. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a drum. I could feel the blood rushing through my veins, fueling my determination to uncover the source of my unease. I had to know if someone was in the house. The thought of an intruder sent a fresh wave of fear through me, but I couldn't let it paralyze me. I moved cautiously, every sense heightened, listening for any sound that might betray the presence of another. Slowly, I approached the bedroom door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The metal felt cold and unyielding under my fingers, a stark reminder of the barrier between me and whatever lay beyond. I hesitated, my mind racing with possibilities. Another creak, this time closer. The sound seemed to reverberate through the house, each creak amplifying my anxiety. It was as if the very walls were conspiring to heighten my fear, each noise a reminder of the unknown lurking in the darkness. It seemed to come from the hallway just beyond my door. The flickering light cast eerie shadows that danced on the walls, creating an almost hypnotic effect. I could feel my pulse quicken, the anticipation building with each passing second. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open, stepping into the hallway. The air felt different here, heavier somehow, as if it carried the weight of unseen eyes watching my every move. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, making me shiver involuntarily. The air was cold, sending a shiver down my spine. My breath came out in visible puffs, a stark reminder of the chill that permeated the house. Each exhale seemed to hang in the air, a ghostly presence that mirrored my growing unease. The only light came from the dying embers in the fireplace, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The flickering light created an almost surreal atmosphere, the shadows twisting and turning as if they had a life of their own. It was both mesmerizing and terrifying. I strained my eyes, trying to pierce the darkness. The shadows seemed to play tricks on my mind, each movement a potential threat. My eyes darted from one corner to another, searching for any sign of life, any indication that I was not alone. The shadows seemed to twist and turn, taking on sinister shapes in my mind. Each flicker of light transformed them into grotesque figures, their forms shifting and changing with every heartbeat. It was as if the darkness itself was alive, feeding off my fear. A soft whisper, barely audible, sent a chill through me. The sound was so faint that I almost doubted I had heard it, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It was a voice, unmistakably human, yet distorted and eerie. It sounded like my name, spoken in a raspy voice. The whisper seemed to echo in the silence, each syllable dripping with malice. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Who could be calling my name in such a way? I froze, every muscle in my body tense. The fear was almost paralyzing, a cold grip that held me in place. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a reminder of my vulnerability. The darkness seemed to close in around me, suffocating and relentless. Section 4. The presence grows. The whisper came again, closer this time. There was no mistaking it. Someone or something was in the hallway with me. Panic welled up inside me, threatening to overwhelm me. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the spot where I had heard the whisper. The air grew heavy, oppressive. It felt like a weight pressing down on me, stealing my breath. The temperature plummeted, and a cold sweat broke out on my skin. I could feel eyes on me, watching my every move. Then, I saw it. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, moved at the edge of my vision. It was tall and slender, with an unnatural gait. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if savoring my terror. I stumbled back, my heart pounding against my ribs. Section 5. Face to face. Who's there? I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. The words seemed to hang in the air, swallowed by the oppressive darkness that surrounded me. The shadow stopped moving, but I could sense it was still watching me. Its presence was palpable, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. The silence stretched on, each second an eternity. The only sound was the relentless ticking of a clock somewhere in the distance, each tick amplifying the tension. Then, the shadow moved again, gliding towards me with an eerie grace. It was as if it was floating, defying the laws of nature. I stood frozen, paralyzed with fear. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a deafening drum in the silence. My mind screamed at me to run, to hide, to do anything but stand there. But my body refused to obey. It was as if I was rooted to the spot, my legs turned to stone. The shadow was getting closer, and I could make out more details. Its form was becoming clearer, more defined, and with each step, my dread grew. It was humanoid in shape, but its limbs were too long, too thin, and its head was cocked at an unnatural angle. The sight was grotesque, a twisted parody of a human being. It stopped just a few feet away from me, and I could feel its cold, dead eyes boring into me. The intensity of its gaze was suffocating, as if it could see into the depths of my soul. A low growl emanated from it, sending shivers down my spine. The sound was primal, a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air around me. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for the inevitable. My mind raced with thoughts of what was to come, each one more terrifying than the last. I could feel the cold sweat trickling down my back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The darkness seemed to close in around me, and I felt a chill that went bone deep. I knew that whatever happened next, I would never be the same again. The shadow loomed over me, its presence a dark cloud that blotted out all hope. I could hear its breath, a raspy, unnatural sound that filled me with dread. I waited, every muscle in my body tensed, for the moment when it would strike. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the shadow was gone. The room was empty, the darkness receding, and I was left standing there, alone and trembling. The encounter had lasted only moments, but it felt like an eternity. I knew that I would never forget the feeling of those cold, dead eyes, the sound of that growl, and the overwhelming sense of fear that had gripped me. It was a face-to-face meeting with the unknown, and it had left its mark on me forever. Section 6. The Unsettling Truth. A hand touched my shoulder. I flinched, my eyes flying open. Standing behind me, a look of concern on her face, was my wife. Relief washed over me, followed by a wave of confusion. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I turned back to face the hallway, but the shadow was gone. The hallway was empty, bathed in the pale light of dawn. Had I imagined it all? It was just a nightmare, I mumbled, my voice shaky. She wrapped her arms around me, and I clung to her, drawing comfort from her presence. But as I turned to go back to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. A cold hand brushed against the back of my neck, and a voice whispered in my ear, "Sleep well."